forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings. Welcome to this week's Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace alongside my co-host, who will never be my partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre, choosing to represent his team this week. I chose not to represent mine. I figure I wore enough Michigan stuff earlier in the week. How are you, Aaron?
Doing well. Doing very well. Man alive. College football last weekend, man, did it live up. That's why we watched the games. That was just from stem to stern. I mean, literally from stem to stern. You got a last-minute field goal in the opening game, not counting the Egg Bowl with Iowa and Nebraska. You got a closing field goal win there. And then if you stayed up until the wee hours of the morning, Sunday morning, you got a closing seconds field goal in Hawaii versus Colorado State as well. So from the game to the Iron Bowl to a number of points in between, just a wonderful weekend of football.
And what's weird about it is it was also very chalky. I mean, there weren't a lot of upsets.
That's
just
true.
So many of these games came down to the wire, you know, and let's face it, man, this sport always delivers. Always.
Yep.
That's why it's our favorite one. All right. Well, let's get to the Big Five on Bigger Ten. So we've already discussed the game, which, by the way, the results are in. At one point, 22 million people were watching Michigan-Ohio State last Saturday.
Is that a lot?
That's a lot. To put it in perspective, the decisive game of the NBA Finals, 14 million people watched. The decisive game of the World Series, 15 million people watched. So, yeah. I mean,
I hear you're saying words, but all I hear are dollar bills.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why everybody in this league's making all this money with the new Big Ten TV deal. But we've talked about this game in depth already on the channel here from a Michigan perspective. If you want to go and check that out, that's what Michigan Podcast is for this week. We spent an entire half an hour discussing this from the Michigan perspective. Let's now discuss it from the Ohio State perspective, where we have Ryan Day is really not even in this situation Jim Harbaugh was in a few years ago. You know, I remember my big complaint a few years ago wasn't so much that he kept losing to Ohio State, but it was like, why are we still losing to like Michigan State and Penn State? Like if Ohio State's historically great and we're losing to them, fine, but we got to at least be better than the other teams, right? Well, Ohio State is that. I mean, Ryan Day has been the head coach at Ohio State since 2019. Aaron, he has lost 3 conference games. They've all been to Michigan. No one else in this league has beaten him. On the other hand, though, as former Ohio State great Maurice Clarett, star running back on their 2002 national championship team, as he pointed out, really, at Ohio State, you are hired to win this game. It's expected, given the talent on the roster every year, you're going to win almost every other game on the schedule. This is the one that you're really paid the big money for. So I thought this game was not like the last two, where it was clear Michigan just physically beat them up. I think Ohio State answered the bell physically in this game. It was a lot like the Michigan-Ohio State games from when I was growing up, and it was both teams were great and it was competitive. And then you just waited to see who was going to make the mistake, and that was Kyle McCord at the end. But Ryan Day walks away empty-handed from Ann Arbor again. It looks very likely, unless I think Ohio State needs Alabama, Texas, and Florida State to all lose this week in order to make the college football playoff. Barring that,
I could see 2 out of 3.
Yeah, you're probably looking at a New Year's Six bowl that almost everyone else would covet, but half of Ohio State's players will probably sit out, right? And it just kind of feels like another long, empty offseason for the Buckeyes. But what do you think?
So if you wanted to watch a game that was executed at a very, very high level, that was the game. No pun intended. That was the game to watch. Because what we watched, other than 2 mistakes from Kyle McCord, one at the beginning, one at the end of the game, other than those 2 mistakes, which proved to be pretty critical, this game was executed on both sides of the ball. There were no glaring deficiencies on either side of the ball from either team. I mean, there were moments that it looked like Ohio State would be unstoppable in that game. There were moments it looked like Michigan was going to be unstoppable in that game. There were moments where it looked like Michigan couldn't move the ball. There were moments where it looked like Ohio State couldn't move the ball. That's all indicative of basically no deficiencies on the field in a game being executed at a very high level. I thought Ohio State's opening drive or first drive of the second half, I have never seen Michigan get gashed like that against another Big Ten team in years. I thought, oh boy, this might actually be Ohio State's game. But at the end of the day, as you said, costly mistake, turnover at the end of the game. That was basically the difference in the game. As far as Ryan Day's future, I think any talks from Ohio State fans that it's time to move on, that's just utterly foolish. Number one, we've talked about this ad nauseum. The game, yes, it's still going to be very intense, but there's not going to be nearly as many implications riding on this game as there are going to be other games. Ohio State fans might say, well, if we can't beat Michigan, how are we going to expect ourselves to beat the Georges of the world? Well, dude, you nearly beat them, if not for a terrible snap last year in the semifinal. So it's not like you're that far off. So I wouldn't be panicking. He's still a very, very good coach. I think any talks about moving on or getting rid of him are just dumb. 3 conference losses, and they're all to the same team, yeah, but still, that's pretty dang good. I don't think people realize how fragile things are when you mess up something like that. Or when you
Nebraska.
Exactly. So any talks to move on from Ryan Day, to me, just really foolish.
Nevertheless, I mean, there's a couple of pregame rituals with this program that, just as an old school Michigan, Ohio State guy, I can't see Woody Hayes and Earl Bruce and those guys being about. The clip, we can't show these clips. We'll get demonetized if we do because they were on television. But I know you've seen them, Aaron. Ryan Day trying to do the whistle drill, bouncing up and down with his team. Pregame, it kind of looked like,
Tom Allen called and said the barbershop quartet.
Yeah, it was cringe, man.
Was not cringe enough, apparently.
Yeah, it kind of looked like the Quiz Bowl guy. Was trying to hang out with his cool football player friends. Yeah. That's kind of what it looked like a little bit.
The whistle blowing was the part that sent it over the edge for me.
Yeah.
That was just...
And then did you see where the players were like doing their own
I did not see
improvisational
that. You
dance?
told me about that, and I decided I'm not even going to go try to look that up.
I don't know,
I grew up in a Baptist church. So any dancing period, but especially interpretive dancing, I'm just... No, that's anathema to my every fiber of my being.
It's not like the Ohio State program. I thought Mark Rogers said it best on our channel yesterday on the Michigan podcast. He said, normally when there have been swings in this rivalry, it's because one team has fallen off. It's not often that they go back and forth. It usually swings one way or the other. He goes, Ohio State's program it hasn't gone anywhere. Michigan just rose to their level. That's what kind of makes this unique. It wasn't like Ohio State made a bad hire as a coach and then Michigan kind of took it from there. Michigan just rose to Ohio State's level. And then this year, I thought Ohio State matched Michigan's level, as you pointed out. And in the end, evenly matched teams. There were 2 combined penalties, Aaron, in the entire game.
Execution at a high level.
Yeah. I mean, it just came down to
beautiful. It really was beautiful football.
It was. And the one stat that we talked about here on the channel last week, this was the biggest difference of any quarterback in the country. Kyle McCord had a top 5 QBR from a clean pocket. He was 110th in QBR when under pressure. And he didn't face a lot of pressure, but he faced it on that last drive and threw that interception. And that was it. I'll bet you if these teams played 10 times on a neutral field, I'll bet you it's 5-5.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, before we move on, I meant to ask you this before the show, or ask you to mention this before the show. We are doing our Confidence Picks reconciliation episode within this episode of Bigger Ten, so we'll do that after Would You Rather later on. I just want to let people know.
I was kind of hoping you forgot because I'm pretty confident I lost, so I was kind of hoping you might have just forgotten about that. I was just going to roll.
Is that your Confidence Picks that you
was
lost?
I was confident
that was your confident
pick. Yeah. All right, let's talk topic number 2. At the start of the year in my college football preview, I predicted a Michigan-Iowa Big Ten championship game, and it didn't proceed down the path I anticipated. Michigan's season kind of went the way that I thought it would. I thought Michigan might lose at Penn State and then end up playing Iowa for the conference championship, but alas, they did not. Michigan ended up running the table again. I had Iowa winning the Big Ten West, but that's because I thought Cade McNamara would provide that steadying force at quarterback, and the offense would at least be competent. Well, That never happened. Cade McNamara got hurt early in the year. Iowa's offense was arguably the worst in all of college football. Nevertheless, its defense and special teams are two of the best units in all of college football. And the Hawkeyes, despite all those injuries, Aaron, find themselves for the second time in 3 years back in the Big Ten championship game. Big Ten West Division champions forever. But this is, I believe I read this week, this is the biggest point spread in the history of Power 5 conference championship games. Michigan currently favored by 23.5 with a total of 35. If you go on DraftKings right now, you can bet Iowa's first half team total. It's 0.5. So the look on your face is great. You're betting whether, but here's the thing. If I'm not on DraftKings, if I were, I'd hammer that.
Over?
I mean, all I need is one turnover. I just need a bad snap on a
Clearly
on a punt,
you've not watched
something
Iowa football.
To get 1 point in an entire half.
It's even money too. That's the best part. Plus 100.
Your thoughts on the matchup, Aaron? These two teams played last year or 2 years ago. It was 42-3, and that Iowa offense was prolific compared to this one.
What's it say about the rest of the Big Ten West? Iowa basically won that division by 3 games.
Yeah.
Technically, it was 2, but they had the tiebreakers over the next 2 teams.
And you take it. Well, I thought you were talking about what happened with the punt return with Cooper DeJean.
And if that were the case, they would have won the division by 4 games, and they still suck. And we might be having some college football playoff implications in this game as well.
One of my buddies, Joe Hugan, came to poker night last week wearing a T-shirt that said it wasn't a fair catch.
Yeah, I got to get one of those. I mean, Kirk Ferentz after the game on Friday, he was still moaning about that game, which I am too. So I can't really judge him for that. I don't know. You hear a number like that, minus 23 in a conference championship game, and sometimes you just have to go with your gut. There is no way in heck that in a conference championship game that there could be that expectation of this disparate of a margin. So you got to go with Iowa, and I actually think Iowa has a chance to really make some noise in this game. I really do. I actually sat down last night, and I went through some trends. I went through some numbers and crunched some numbers, and I actually came up with 3 data points, 3 keys to victory for the Hawkeyes. Number 1 is spontaneous Ebola amongst the Michigan team. Anytime now, before now and Saturday. Spontaneous Ebola. I don't even know what that is. In fact, I don't even know.
We want to know what that is.
I don't even know if spontaneous Ebola is a thing. I don't even know really what the effects of Ebola are, but I'm pretty sure you can't play.
Ebola has a 25% infection or infection fatality rate, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So even better. Spontaneous Ebola. And for those who survive the spontaneous Ebola, keys to victory, number 2, mass hysteria at the Michigan team hotel for those that do make the trip.
I love the graphic from like Salem.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mass hysteria at the Michigan team hotel. And then during the actual game, those who have survived the spontaneous Ebola and the mass hysteria at their hotel, they're not going to know what to do with punting on first down. So I would just punt every first down. Every time you get the ball, just punt it right back. I think it'll mess with their mind. They just overcame hysteria, mass hysteria. It's going to screw with their mind. So those are my 3 keys to victory, Steve. What do you think?
I think the problem Iowa has in this game.
Look at you trying to break this down. Just dropped a mass Ebola. That is a 25% infection fatality rate. Hey, let's do some earnest breakdowns of this game.
If we're being serious, number 1, it's been an incredible season for Iowa. No question about it. Absolutely incredible. Okay. But if you're breaking this game down, even if Cade and Eric All and Cooper DeJean are in this game, you still have the same problem. Now, the talent gap is not as wide as it is right now. I mean, we wouldn't have, if we still had Eric All, we wouldn't have Barner. We took the Indiana transfer because we lost Eric All. So he'd be starting for us. Cooper DeJean could start for us. I mean, I can't even imagine a corner duo of Will Johnson and Cooper DeJean. We're just going to play man-to-man all game long and gap blitz you to like the freaking 85 Bears if those are our corners, okay? So, but those guys are not here. And I'm not sure how many players Iowa's going to start Saturday night would start for us without those guys there. And
0.
And where you get into the talent gap where it gets hard to make it up is when the styles are the same.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, Iowa wants to play a line of scrimmage game. So does Michigan. All right. Iowa wants to play complementary football. So does Michigan. Iowa wants to play a game about high efficiency. These are two of the least penalized teams in the country. So does Michigan. And I think that's the issue. A lot of times when you see great upsets in college football, one of two dynamics has occurred. One, it's like early in the year, like an opening game, and we don't have preseason, and a team is breaking in a new quarterback or new special teams, and they get caught with their pants down where that's concerned. Or you get into the situation like what we ran into back in the day against Appalachian State. You're playing a very prolific offense, and it's similar to college basketball. You're just taking on a team a night that they make 15 threes and nothing you do about it. You just tip your cap and we'll see you next night, see you tomorrow night. Iowa doesn't bring that kind of an offense to the table where if Michigan's not clicking on offense and can't get to 28 or 31 points and Iowa's hot because of the style of offense they play, look out. And so I think without that stylistic difference, and then you throw in on top of that the injuries that take away really a lot of Iowa's top end talent on the team, I think that's just what you're seeing reflective in the point spread.
So since we're doing this seriously and soberly now, I think from a Michigan perspective, I think what I would be most worried about is not on the field, not the cleats on the field. It's in between the ears. This is the third year you've been to this game.
Mm-hmm.
First year, West team comes in. That's Iowa. You kick their ass. Thank you.
And Michigan never been there before.
Michigan had never been there before. Last year, it's Purdue. Come in, take your whooping. Okay, we're going off to the playoffs again. This year, Michigan in the playoffs, if they make it to the playoffs, which they will, in the playoffs, I thought against TCU, they didn't take them seriously enough. So their lesson is learned in the playoffs, but this is the third Big Ten championship game in a row. The West team comes in, takes their whooping. Oh, and it's slowly Iowa 2 down all of these players. I haven't seen any evidence necessarily other than that TCU game to suggest that Michigan allows itself or is immature enough to have a letdown spot like this. But that's basically the only thing. You let Iowa stick around for the first half, within a score, something like that. If it's still within a score as you head into the fourth quarter, that's when Michigan players, I think, might start double clutching a little bit, so to speak, might start thinking, crap, we're not supposed to be in this position. The chances of that happening, all of that happening in perfect succession is like 5% or less. So that's the only thing that I would be concerned of. I mean, with Iowa, it's just you got to have a lot of things go exceedingly your direction. Now, there have been a lot of things that have not gone Iowa's direction, so maybe we can count in terms of injuries and things of that nature. A lot of balls actually on the field this year that just did not bounce their ways, calls not going their ways, and they still won 10 games. Maybe a progression to the mean is in store, but I don't think it's in this game.
Yeah, I think that's really good analysis. From a Michigan fan perspective, I'm hoping having Jimmy back. Remember, he hasn't coached this team in 3 weeks. He didn't coach this, not on game day anyway. He was there all week long until Saturday. They've not had him on the field during this toughest stretch of their schedule. So I'm kind of hoping having coach back kind of alleviates some of that letdown factor, because that's clearly an issue. By the way, can you even imagine Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, having to give Jim Harbaugh the championship trophy on national TV at the end of this thing potentially? Would that be among the most awkward photo ops in Big Ten sports history?
That's coming up in Would You Rather.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's not spoil it then. All right, let's talk bowl games. We're going to get all the bowl bids coming up on Sunday. Here's the updated projections that we have based on the latest information out there about bowls and deals that are being cut, et cetera. Right now, we are projecting Florida State versus Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. That's 1-4. For the one half of the college football playoff, and then a traditional Rose Bowl, Oregon versus Michigan out in Pasadena. Elsewhere for the Big Ten, we have Ohio State representing the Big Ten in the Orange Bowl. That will be against an ACC team. So it'll be against either the ACC champion or the next best ACC team that's not in the college football playoff. We have Penn State versus Texas in a battle of blue bloods in the Cotton Bowl. The Peach Bowl, we have Tulane versus Missouri. In the Fiesta Bowl, Alabama against Washington. And then we have the rest of the Big Ten bowl games working out this way. Iowa to Disney World to Orlando against Ole Miss. You want to talk about a contrast. Lane Kiffin and Kirk Ferentz.
These two, Citrus and Las Vegas, these would be fascinating bowl games.
Maryland versus Clemson, Wisconsin out in Vegas. In Nashville, Wisconsin, Texas A&M in the Music City Bowl. Rutgers basically gets a home game in the Pinstripe against Duke. The Guaranteed Rate, Northwestern and Kansas. And then the Quick Lane Bowl, Minnesota is the last of the 82 teams needed for bowl eligibility. They were number 1 in APR, so they're going to get a bowl bid, that's for sure. And so we have them being the Big Ten representative against Toledo in the Quick Lane.
Selfishly, I'm split on Florida State. Selfishly, I want to see the best possible matchup, and without their quarterback there, that's going to be a drubbing.
Yeah.
If they even beat Louisville, which I'm not convinced they will this weekend. So selfishly, but at the same time, if they beat Louisville, they have to be in. So I'm kind of split on Florida State. Oregon versus Michigan, you would go to that game, right, Steve?
Yep, I would be there.
That would be an awesome game.
It's a conference game next year. You can stop and think about how weird that sounds.
Be an awesome game. In the last year with the Pac-12, you thought, well, might not get a Big Ten matchup in the Rose Bowl, but hey, Big Ten Pac-12 matchup in the Rose Bowl, but that might happen. Hope it does. That would be a really, really cool matchup. As I said before as well, I mean, Cotton, Penn State, Texas. We'll see where Penn State is mentally, what they're playing for. That would be a cool matchup. But the two that stick out are the Citrus Bowl, if that matchup happens, Iowa versus Ole Miss. I don't think you're the only person projecting that either, Steve. I've seen a few projections of this being the Citrus Bowl. That would be a cool matchup. And then Las Vegas, Maryland versus Clemson. That would be a very, very awesome matchup to watch as well. Just disparate, at least a little bit disparate styles there.
Keep that graphic up for a second. Start thinking about great uniform games. Obviously, Michigan and Oregon is a traditional Rose Bowl in that setting.
As long as Oregon doesn't screw that
go
up.
too crazy, I agree. Penn State, Texas, that's a great uniform game. Iowa, Ole Miss is a great uniform game. If Ole Miss wears the old baby blues with Iowa there with the traditional black and gold. There's a few uniform games that would look really good out there on the field. It's a big thing to me.
Duke.
Nah, maybe not.
Red and blue.
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Texas, that's red and red.
Yeah, red and burgundy.
Yeah.
All right. Enough about that. Let's get to Tom Allen. Indiana did the thing. They ended up firing Tom Allen. Now, he had a $21 million buyout. The school negotiated him down to 15 in exchange for it being 2 lump sums that will not be offset if he takes another job. I would imagine that Tom would be coveted as a defensive coordinator if he wants to continue coaching next season. But this is a big move for Indiana to make. When you look at the situation with their facilities, their stadium, the $15 million to buy out Tom Allen is one of the most exorbitant investments Indiana's made in its football program in a long time. So, what do you think that means? Hoosiers getting serious about football, or I have a theory of what I think it means. You ready for this? We've already talked about the teams coming into the Big Ten. There's been a lot of talk about relegation. One of the things you have in the NFL with the salary cap is people don't realize, Aaron, there's also a salary floor. You have to spend a minimum amount of money as well, kind of like an ante up, at the poker table to play in the NFL. I wonder if this is some of Indiana saying, hey, man, we just, we can't keep this going. We got to at least make it look like we're trying here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because
I don't know, the next TV deal, maybe networks come back and say, sure, we'll give you $1 billion more, but now we got to cut some of the fat here, So I wonder if that's part of Indiana. It's more of we have to show that we actually care about football here, and we're not just sitting here cashing checks.
Yeah, stapler guy. I don't know. I don't know how serious. I'm not well versed in Indiana athletics. I'm not. You had Michael Penix there, guys. I mean, he was in the Heisman running. Still is. and you let that go, and it's just been downhill since then. I don't know, again, where you go from here, especially, as I said last week, you're looking around and you say, hey, there's Ryan Braun, Big Ten Coach of the Year, won 7 games at Northwestern, and they were expecting to crater. What are your realistic expectations if you're Indiana? Because there is just no excuse, especially with the new TV deal. There's no excuse not to try your darndest. There's no excuse not to have a president of the university who does not understand what the importance of college athletics, especially at this level. There's no excuse for not doing your darndest, and I'm just not sure if Indiana has, both in football and in basketball, to make sure, hey, we are competitive to whatever level we can be. I know in basketball the expectations are always higher, but they haven't been great in basketball necessarily. Not to the level that they were under the coach that just passed away, Bobby Knight. So I don't know where you go from here. Here's my theory. You want to hear my tinfoil hat theory?
I'd love to hear it. You bet.
I don't think they're actually firing Tom Allen. I think they negotiated this settlement so Allen could put that $15 million into a new NIL program, and then they're going to hire him back once he does that, so he can go out and buy some actual players.
Oh, I thought you said that they were giving him the resources to go on tour with that barbershop.
There's that. Hey, what is stopping what's stopping a deal like that from happening?
Well,
you can't. I'm guessing athletic departments can't take the TV money and put it directly into an NIL program, can they?
Who would punish him?
Yeah.
By the way, Indiana, as we are recording this, has 17 players in the transfer portal since Tom Allen got fired. 17, including the entire offensive line.
Who's counting?
But who's counting? Finally, I don't know how we missed this. We didn't know about this going into the year. But this is kind of a big deal and deserves a shout out, don't you think? Taulia Tagovailoa is the all-time Big Ten passing yardage leader, all time, in the history of the league. He broke that record against Rutgers last weekend. By the way, the record was held probably by not who you think. I think probably a lot of people would have guessed maybe like Drew Brees when he was at Purdue.
It's Curtis Painter.
Yeah, it was same school, but it was Curtis Painter who actually held that record. But yeah, so just we got to mention that, man. That's a hell of an accomplishment to have on your resume to show your kids 20 years from now, right? So props to Taulia Tagovailoa for that, Aaron.
And he did it very quietly, but I mean, we've been talking about him for years as being one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, so I don't know how we let this slip past us, but that is a heck of an accomplishment. You look at the number of quarterbacks, as you kind of mentioned there, that have come through our league that have done extraordinary things. It's just the problem is, especially in this day and age, you're starting for 2 or 3 years at max before you move on to the next level. He stuck around and he stuck it out, and he deserves all the props that he can get.
Amen. All right, we'll come back. We'll play Would You Rather when we return. All right, Aaron. It is time to play Would You Rather. Here we go. Would you rather bet Iowa over its team total of 6.5 or over 36 for the game in the Big Ten Championship?
Over 36 for the game. There's a much higher chance that Jim Harbaugh will have a chance to run up the score, which he would like to do, than it is that Iowa will score 7 points, even against Iowa's defense. Sorry, I'm not trying to be that fan. I'm sorry, I'm just being a realist here. I'm on
the over. I think Michigan may hit the total itself.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I'm not a Pollyanna, but that is what it is. That is still shocking total for any game, but especially a conference championship game.
Indoors on a fast track?
Yep. For you, would you rather be Tony Petitti on Saturday night or Brian Ferentz?
Oh, gosh. I cannot even imagine Tony Petitti, who didn't show up for the Michigan-Ohio State game. I don't remember the commissioner of the league not showing up for the Michigan-Ohio State game, like ever. He wasn't there.
Oh, did you see Ohio State's athletic director?
Gene Smith get into it with
that.
one of
that was
Michigan's sideline
odd.
people are known for being a tad aggressive, I guess we'll say. Okay. But I think I'd rather be Brian Ferentz. I kind of already got my Gatorade bath and everything else. I'm good. I know my fate. I'm good to go. I've already had my awkwardness. I already faced all these questions all summer long. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If I'm Tony Petitti, I'm largely, except for the address I gave in July at Media Days, I'm largely an unknown figure. I've not even been seen or heard from in many cases publicly. And I've got to go out there potentially on Saturday night in front of about 10 to 15 million people and give Jim Harbaugh a championship trophy after I just suspended him. I think that's much more cringe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, for you. Would you rather have the most talented roster in the league every year, but a lot of those guys leave early, so Ohio State, or the second or third most talented roster in the league, but a lot of those guys stay and develop, like Michigan? I mean, if you look at the NIL programs, Ohio State spends up front on recruits. Michigan spends on the back end. I mean, Blake Corum celebrated his 23rd birthday against Ohio State, all right? A lot of players don't celebrate their 23rd birthday in college football anymore, not even at the Group of 5 level, for goodness sakes. All right. So these are the two culture roster building approaches from both the top two powers in our league, and they're dramatically different. So what do you think?
Giving me the more talented roster every day of the week. Yeah. It's not that complicated for me. Give me the most talented roster. I think what you're watching with Michigan, and they have had sustained success here now for a period of a few years. What you're watching, though, is really a series of stars aligning and really, really, I guess it's hard to replicate in a hard to replicate manner where you've got a lot of seniority, but yet you've got some pretty good depth as well. You've got a lot of maturity amongst your younger guys. That's just a combination that you really can't plan for that type of thing. So I'm not saying that they're going to drop off the face of the map in the next 2 or 3 years. But if you're telling me, and what you're telling me as well is that, if I've got the most talented roster every single year, then I'm doing a pretty good job of reloading. So I'm going to bank my chances on that rather than banking on developing guys who are not quite as talented. Finally, for you, if you're up by 14 points as a Michigan fan in the first half against Iowa, would you rather sit your starters to avoid injury or run up the score? Because Iowa's not coming back from 14 down.
No, I agree they're not. I think a lot of it comes down to did Georgia win previously or not? If Georgia won, then you're locked into number 2 pretty much no matter what. So then I think you look at the scenario you're talking about. If Georgia didn't win, and then it's about who's going to be number 1, then and that you get the advantage of picking you picking first of where you want to play, which is a kind of a way of also picking your opponent indirectly. Then I think you might consider it. But then even then, you go back and watch the game that they played 2 years ago. I mean, Michigan scored a couple touchdowns late to make it 42-3. I'm not sure they'll do that this time because of what you just said with the injury factor and the presumption of how much more. Michigan was just happy to get to the Big Ten championship game 2 years ago. Now it's a step to a process. But I think what happened with Georgia in the time slot previously has a lot to say with your answer.
All right, that's it.
All right, we'll come back and we'll find out how'd we do. How bad did Aaron beat me on our confidence picks, and then we'll wrap things up here in a moment. All right, welcome back here. Before we get to this week's Twitter poll and our feedback of the week, it is time, Aaron, to give you your flowers. How'd it go?
It was a brutal week for both of us, actually. Brutal.
Oh, my.
You got your 7-point pick.
Oh, that's like a federal government budget tally.
And your 1-point pick. Missed your bonus.
Oh, that's
Northwestern
brutal.
Beat Illinois outright.
That's brutal.
I, on the other hand, I picked Penn State as well. I picked Michigan. That combined with your pick of Nebraska over Iowa was kind of your undoing. Also got Purdue, as you did, over Indiana. I missed on my over-under in Iowa-Nebraska, which honestly should have hit. It really should have hit the way that first half was going for Iowa. You ready to see the final score at the end of all things here?
Sure.
457, that's in red, so you know, to 461.
Wow.
2 straight years. Beating you on the confidence picks, Steve.
Even with the added variance, it came down to 4 points. And those 4 points were essentially me picking against my favorite team. I can live with that.
That's the most Michigan podcast on brand thing ever.
I'm totally fine losing like that.
We'll do it
time.
again. Yeah, we'll do it again this year or this way next year. There was one suggestion I think probably we should put into there. We'll reveal these one at a time next year instead of putting them all out.
Yeah.
That's probably a good suggestion, but I like doing it this way this year. That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Maybe we'll bust it out, just a little bonus for the bowl games maybe.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to our Twitter poll results. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you who wins the 2023 Big Ten Football Championship. 62% said Michigan. 38% said Iowa.
That should be like 90-10 maybe, 95-5. I'd like to meet these Iowa fans and smoke what they're smoking. I just clicked on Iowa because I wanted to reveal the results, but I figured it was going to be much more lopsided.
That brings us to our feedback of the week from Kevin Holm, who says, Hawk fans, enjoy Indy Friday night and Saturday morning. Afternoon is when the Blue shows up. Their numbers were staggering last time. So I was curious about this 2 years ago because of Iowa's incredibly and well-earned reputation of the Bumblebees of traveling. What was the makeup going to be there at Lucas Oil Stadium? And it turned out to be about 70-30 Michigan, which stunned me. But I heard the same thing, which was during the week, Iowa fans came in, they're flying in, they did great. Michigan people are just driving down the day of the game from the Detroit area in a lot of cases to Indianapolis and just completely took this thing over starting around lunchtime on Saturday leading up until the game, right? So I'm curious if
now that you've been here 3 times in a row though, does that play into this
I
at
don't
all?
know. There's that, and then there's also if you're an Iowa fan, the economy ain't great.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
you're 23-point underdog, but this may be your last chance to go. Yeah. You're right about that.
I was actually kicking this around with one of my buddies. It's like, hey, this is going to be the last chance probably in our lifetimes to go to a Big Ten championship game.
Are you going to try to go?
No.
Okay.
I've done enough driving this month. So
I've got a speaking engagement out of state, which I scheduled, not knowing if we were going to make the Big Ten championship game or not.
Where are you going?
I'm going to Florida, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll be watching the game on an iPad during the banquet I'm speaking at before and after, while I'm sitting there at dinner.
I got a tweet from the Big Ten or Bigger Ten account. Is that what you're telling me?
You might have to.
Okay.
Yeah, at least for a little bit. Okay. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, you do. You're okay at it. You're pretty good.
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right, we'll come back next week right here on the channel. In the meantime, don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review. We would love it if you did that because it helps us find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. And plus, we really appreciate the ego boost you provide when you do it. Don't forget as well to follow us on Twitter in between episodes at Bigger10 on Twitter, at Bigger10 there. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next week right here on Bigger 10.